My name is Allison Carter. I am 34 years old and I live and work in Boston as a cybersecurity audit specialist. I'm not someone who seeks attention and I'm not comfortable under the spotlight. But that day, at my sister Brianna Carter's lavish gender reveal party on the outskirts of Chicago, where she was showing her baby bump to dozens of guests and thousands watching a live stream, I became the center of a shocking truth. Just as the music faded, a court officer and two county police officers walked into the middle of the laughing crowd and glittering confetti. They read a court order aloud, declaring that the twins in Brianna's womb did not belong to her, they belonged to me. My IVF embryos, which had mysteriously gone missing 3 years earlier during a reproductive treatment, had somehow been implanted into my own sister in a way I had not yet been able to imagine. Ethan, Brianna's boyfriend, went pale. My mother, Valerie Carter, reached to snatch the paperwork, but the screen behind her suddenly lit up and played footage from the storage room camera. There she was with Dr. Roy Kincaid in the embryo storage area in the middle of the night. Nobody said a word. Blue and pink confetti kept falling in the silence, and the family everyone assumed was perfect collapsed inward before our eyes. Have you ever had a relative take a piece of your bloodline without your knowledge? What would you do if your own sister, the one you love, turned out to be carrying your child? Leave a comment below, hit like, and subscribe if you want to follow me as I uncover the truth, a story not only about betrayal, but about the fight to reclaim justice for the small lives that were exploited. Here's how it all began. I left that party in silence, not because I was weak, but because I needed air. My breath had been squeezed since the words IVF embryos, legally owned by Allison Carter, appeared in front of hundreds of people. For several minutes, I heard nothing but the pounding of my own blood. It wasn't anger, it was as if something inside me had collapsed. I didn't drive away right away. I sat in my car, hands on the wheel, and let a flood of memories wash over me. In 2022, I walked into Boston Fertility, hoping to become a mother after learning that my natural fertility was nearly non-existent. I followed every step of the process. Counseling sessions, daily injections to stimulate my ovaries, sleepless nights as hormones swung unpredictably. When a nurse told me that one of my frozen embryos couldn't be located, they called it a system error. I called it a nameless pain. At that time, I was still engaged to Cole Davenport, a decent, steady man who shared my values. We believed love might overcome biological limits, but losing those embryos, the only hope of having a child, created a distance between us. Nobody argued. There was no formal breakup. We simply stopped planning the wedding. I withdrew from IVF support groups. I stopped going to egg donor meetings or adoption seminars. I dove into work. More precisely, I buried myself in work. A year later, I took a contract auditing security for a network of medical clinics across the Northeast. Internal systems, security protocols, encrypted patient records, those were the places I felt safest, because there was logic, code, and traceability. Not like my family. From the outside, the Carters looked like an all-American success story. My father, Charles Carter, a former Navy officer with a steady, resonant voice and upright bearing, founded Carter Transit Solutions after leaving the service, and it grew into a respected regional company. My mother, Valerie, used to be a high school teacher, but ever since Brianna's rise on social media, she became the family's image manager, overseeing every statement, every post, every event invitation. My sister, Brianna, is the child I once carried, the one I comforted after she broke her leg in the backyard. Now, she's a social media queen with nearly 1 million followers, specializing in lifestyle, pregnancy content, and the Carter family brand. For them, everything could be framed with pretty hashtags. Number blessed family, number Carter legacy, number live with class. I was different. I lived outside the frame. I'm not someone who broadcasts herself, but I never expected to become the one cropped out of my own family portrait. I had always been the fixer. The dutiful, high-achieving child who caused no trouble. The one who called 911 when mom fainted from low blood pressure. The one who helped dad sort out a tax problem in 2015 when the company hit a rough patch. The one who wiped blood off Brianna when she slipped in the bathroom and didn't tell mom. And because I never demanded anything, my presence became convenient to ignore. A month ago, while reviewing payment transactions between clinics and a software vendor, I found a strange invoice pattern. The patient identifier line looked eerily familiar. ACART22. I used that very code when I labeled my IVF records. I cross-checked. Same month, same year, same embryo batch code. I didn't tell anyone, I didn't call a lawyer or make a scene. I saved the files, flagged them, and put them in a private folder. At some point, I'd learned to observe in silence as a survival mechanism. 2 weeks before the party, my mother called and invited me back to Chicago for a gender reveal. Our family will soon have a new member. You don't want to be the outsider, do you? She said, her voice sweet but carrying the weight of the years she'd pushed me to perform. I didn't answer right away. After I hung up, I decided to go, not for Brianna, not for Mom, but because I needed to see for myself. I didn't expect anything big. I only wanted to check my feelings. But when Ethan, Brianna's boyfriend, led her out and placed his hand on her belly with a proud smile, something tightened in my chest. Not jealousy and intuition. Then the moment arrived. Confetti burst, the court order appeared, and the video played. I understood that over the past 3 years I had not lost my mind. I had lost the child I'd never held, at the hands of people who shared my family name. Sitting in the car, I remembered the question the doctor asked when I decided to freeze embryos. If something goes wrong, who has the right to claim the embryos? I answered without hesitation. Only me, no one else. And yet here I was, my sister pregnant with my embryos, with my mother's silent consent and the involvement of a doctor who'd once been investigated for falsifying patient records. What hurt most wasn't what they did, it was that they assumed I didn't deserve to know. I pulled up the ACART22 folder on my phone and sent everything to Serena, the only person I trusted at that moment. She didn't ask where I was. I'll be at the lawyer's office tomorrow morning, she replied. Send the footage if you have it. I sent it. And then for the first time in years, I let myself cry. Not for the loss, but because I felt the start of a fight I could no longer avoid. A week after that chaotic gender reveal, Mom called me back to Chicago in a soft voice. She didn't mention what had happened, offered no explanation, made no apology. Just the familiar invitation, as though nothing had left a mark on the perfect family image she'd spent so long maintaining. Allison, the family is having dinner this Sunday, she said. Ethan wants to officially meet everyone. I think you should come. Not for Brianna, for your father. I was silent. My father was not a man who showed emotion easily, but I'd never doubted his love for me, so I agreed. Not to accept anything, but to listen, to see more clearly the shadows hidden under the tablecloth and polite toasts. That evening, the restaurant was in a historic mansion on the north side of the city. Warm yellow light, fresh flowers at every place setting, and the faint scent of oak in the air. Everything looked staged, as if the family were filming an episode of a reality show. Mom sat at the head of the table, hair meticulously styled, wearing a string of white pearls, the same practiced smile at the corner of her mouth. Brianna entered with Ethan. Her bump was evident beneath a cream satin dress. Ethan walked beside her, his hand resting lightly on her back, as if the world revolved around her every step. You made it. Brianna tilted her head and smiled at me, an edge in her expression that didn't read as entirely friendly. Perfect. The family reunion. I nodded and sat down without saying more. My father glanced at me, his eyes briefly softening but not finding the words. Mom assumed the role of neutral host. Let's not talk about anything tense tonight, she said, pouring wine into my glass. Just family time. Silverware clinked. Scattered conversation filled the room. Ethan told the story of how he'd met Brianna at a content creation conference. I was drawn to her right away, he said, eyes fixed on her. She shines in a way I can't explain. Maybe it's pregnancy hormones making her glow. Brianna giggled, smoothing her stomach. I kept quiet. The air tasted overly sweet, thin like lacquer over a cracked painting. My mother looked at me with a look that seemed to say, "Don't ruin this moment." Then Brianna turned to me, as if she couldn't help herself. So, Allison, she said, her tone airy but with a hidden blade. I'm so grateful I could get pregnant naturally. Not everyone receives such a miraculous gift, right? I looked at her. Not everyone needs to steal a gift to get it, I replied evenly, without raising my voice. No one spoke. A hush long enough for everyone to hear their own heartbeat settled across the table. Ethan stiffened. My father set his knife down but didn't look up. Mom lifted her glass as though hoping to swallow the discomfort. No one defended me. I didn't expect them to. Dessert arrived, and a familiar voice sounded from the entrance. Hope I'm not too late. I turned. It was Cole, walking in with a man in a gray suit carrying a stack of documents. Heads turned. My father stood to shake his hand. Cole has just accepted a strategic advisory role with Carter Transit Solutions, he said with pride. We're expanding into medical logistics, and we need someone with a systems background. I couldn't speak for a moment. Cole looked at me with an expression that was calm but not indifferent. He seemed surprised to see me there. Hi, Allison, he said softly, then sat down across from me, as if by some invisible arrangement. Brianna laughed and broke the silence. Wow, what a coincidence. Everyone in this house seems to be tangled together in such interesting ways. It's not a coincidence, my mother chimed in quietly. The company's new direction needs trustworthy people. Cole is a visionary choice. I stared at her. Inside, I felt an emptiness where anger might have been. Only a cold skepticism remained. When everyone moved outside to the patio for tea, I slipped back into the house. I needed a few minutes alone. My phone buzzed. An anonymous message. Check Roy Kincaid, Chicago. Embryo storage system. Door number 4. Camera time. 2:37 a.m. Batch code ACART22. I froze. My hand trembled slightly as I tapped the attached photo. A shot down the aisle of a cold storage room, dimly lit but clearly showing the storage door open. The number 4 was stenciled plainly on the wall. I scrolled. A second image appeared. A white lab coat stained with a red smear. A small detail, seemingly insignificant, but I recognized the collar, the same style. Dr. Roy Kincaid had worn at Midwest ReproCare's press briefing. I shoved the phone into my pocket and stepped back out to where people were talking. The chaotic feeling had gone. What remained was a cold certainty. My suspicions had a basis. Whoever sent that message, someone was very close to the truth. They could be an ally. They could also be the link about to blow up the perfect picture my family had been staging. A breeze drifted across the porch. Brianna smiled, hands on her belly. My mother sat beside her, eyes on her phone as if she were controlling the whole scene. Cole stood next to my father, discussing logistics and market share. I tightened my hand briefly, then forced a polite smile. Because the real game hadn't started yet, it had only just moved the first pawn. I met Serena Morales a cloudy Monday morning at a small coffee shop just outside the Loop office district. She arrived early, sitting by the window, typing on a tablet. Slim build, brown hair pulled back, her face sharp in the way of someone who has seen too much to be easily shaken. I used to be an internal investigator for the Illinois Department of Public Health for nearly 8 years, Serena said as she poured more coffee. Now I do private work. Your case hits the part of reproductive medicine that keeps me awake. Assisted reproduction, embryo control, and everything clinics prefer not to answer. I handed her the folder I'd assembled over the past few days. Screenshots of anonymous emails, scanned invoices for obstetric services billed to Brianna with funding traced to an organization called Lakeshore Philanthropy, LLC. Under each invoice was an internal payment code with a strange format, LSA 12 Cart 22. That's what caught my eye, I said, pointing to the code. It even includes the year and a shorthand of my name. Cart 22 was the identifier Boston Fertility assigned to my embryo case back then. Same year. I don't think it's coincidence. Serena nodded, pulled up a file on her tablet. I looked into Lakeshore Philanthropy 3 months ago for another matter. The fund doesn't accept public donations, it doesn't file transparent reports, and it only sponsors a very small group of clinics. All of them are within the Midwest ReproCare chain. I sat silent for a few seconds. Midwest ReproCare was where Brianna had been receiving prenatal care, she continued. The legal entity behind the fund is a law firm in Des Moines. But the interesting part is that if you trace the money back from Lakeshore, it starts at a much more familiar source. She turned the screen toward me. The name that appeared was Carter Transit Solutions Holding Entity, authorized by my father, Charles Carter. I didn't react right away. My hand rested on the table, then clenched. It wasn't shock so much as a slow, quiet fatigue. The weariness of someone beginning to realize that apparently separate pieces were actually part of a single deliberate picture and I was the only person not holding the blueprint. I inhaled slowly and asked, "Can you help me find an attorney experienced in reproductive rights? I don't want to take the wrong steps." Serena nodded. "There's someone I trust. He used to work with the National Bioethics Federation and now has a private practice in Boston. His name is Graham Whitaker." That afternoon, I called Graham. His voice was low and measured. I need to see all medical records related to your IVF, especially the notes about the missing embryo in 2022, he said. If we can prove that embryo belonged to you and was used without lawful consent, we can petition the court to establish biological ownership. I sent the documents that night. While waiting for Graham to review them, I reopened the anonymous email trail. The sender never signed a name, but one sentence at the end grabbed me. Not everyone in the house is loyal to Valerie. Valerie, my mother, never missed anything. Someone very close to her, or someone who used to work for her, was telling me that the calm surface of our family life was actually churning underneath. 3 days later, I bumped into Logan Pierce at a healthcare data security conference in Evanston. He's an investigative data journalist who's broken stories about shell charities down south. After the presentation, I struck up a conversation in the coffee area. I didn't say much, only mentioned Lakeshore Philanthropy and Midwest Repro Care. Logan frowned. You're interested in that? I'm tracing suspicious payments linked to an Eastern logistics company, Carter Transit. Ring any bells? I didn't answer at first, but my look at him was enough to signal I was more than mildly interested. He pulled a portable hard drive from his coat. I've got logs from the medical transport system tied to Chicago embryo storage facilities. Internal shipping codes are odd. One reads, Medcart 2 divided by LSH 4 divided by Kincaid. If I'm reading that right, Kincaid would be some doctor's name. My heart stuttered. Roy Kincaid, the chief obstetrician at Midwest Repro Care, the same doctor who showed up in the leaked video from the gender reveal. I nodded, my voice hoarse. Can you give me a copy? Logan didn't ask why. I'll send it, but if you keep pursuing this, be prepared. Money trails like these rarely involve only one person. That night, I sat alone in front of my laptop, the glow from the documents penciling tired shadows across my face. I read the shipping logs closely. Medical shipments labeled from Boston Fertility Storage to Chicago with recipient listed as LSH LLC, shorthand for Lakeshore. One shipment stood out, priority transfer type, embryo, ref code, a CART22. Leaning back in my chair, I felt certainty settle. The frozen embryo that had been mine had been sent to the exact place where Brianna was undergoing treatment, and the whole operation had been funded by money funneled from my father's company under the guise of charity. Rain started against the window. I walked over, watching the streaks of water blur the world outside like threads connecting me to the truth, cold, exact, undeniable. Serena's words kept ringing in my ear. Not everyone in the house is loyal to Valerie. Maybe my father. Maybe Brianna herself. Or someone else among the players pretending on stage. But clearly, someone wanted me to see this picture. And now, the first lines were coming into focus. I arranged to meet Brianna privately on a Saturday afternoon at the tea shop where we used to go every Thanksgiving in high school. The window seat was still there, sunlight filtering through lace curtains and casting a pattern across the dark wood table. She arrived 10 minutes late, wearing an oversized coat, light but careful makeup, masking the strain. I could see the faint shadow under her eyes, hurriedly filled in brows, and her hands constantly rubbing her belly, though no one asked her to. I placed the printed folder in front of her. Lakeshore invoices, medical transport logs, the camera storage images, and on top a photocopy of the shipping slip bearing the ACART22 code, signed for delivery to the Chicago branch the week Brianna started care at Midwest Repro Care. Brianna read slowly at first, then faster, her lips pressed together. When she reached the storage room log image, she set the papers down and leaned back, staring toward the window as if looking for a way out. Did you know, I asked, keeping my voice steady, that you're pregnant with my embryos? She shook her head slowly, then began to sob. No, I didn't, Brianna said, voice hoarse. Mom told me to do what she said. She said you'd given up, that the embryos had no legal value, that if I didn't act, I'd be past a certain age. Didn't you ask more questions? I stared at her. Didn't it strike you as odd that a complicated reproductive process would be so easy and smooth? Didn't you feel that something was wrong? Brianna covered her face. A tear slipped down the back of her hand. She didn't scream or rage. She crumpled quietly, the collapse of someone who finally hit the limit of her conscience. I thought you didn't want to be a mother, she whispered. I thought you had given up. And I didn't want to be like you alone, without kids, with no one calling me mom. I said nothing. Pain tightened in my chest, not anger, but a nameless ache. The girl in front of me who had betrayed and concealed was still my sister, shoved into a play whose director was my mother. Valerie planned it all, I said slowly. From shipping the embryo, to the funding, to burying the records. But I never lost a child, and I won't lose one now. Brianna bowed her head, hands on her belly. The air between us thickened, as if the small room couldn't hold enough oxygen for both of us. I slid the teacup closer to her. I'm not here to make you terminate. I'm not here to destroy your reputation or make you a spectacle. I only want what's right to be acknowledged, and that starts with me being the legal mother of the 2 children in your womb. She didn't answer. I stood, collecting the folder gently, not to coerce, but to protect. When I stepped out of the tea shop, Valerie was already there, as if she had predicted this meeting. She wore a wine-colored leather coat, gloves on her hands, her eyes betraying no warmth. She didn't greet me, didn't ask a thing. "You've made everything a mess," she said. "You already have it all. Career, reputation, money. Brianna, she only wants a family." "Not at any cost," I replied, without turning my head. "You're selfish, Allison. You always act like you're more righteous than everyone else, but you don't understand a mother's fear when she sees her daughter turn 30 with nothing in hand. You've never been a mother. You don't understand." I turned to face her. "And that's because you never let me be one." Valerie froze. A crack appeared in her gaze, but she quickly covered it with a polite smile. "Do you intend to take this public?" she asked, as if measuring how far I was willing to go. "No," I said, "but I will take it to court. And I have a lawyer, evidence, even someone inside the family helping me that you don't know about." Her brows lifted, just a flicker of unease. "Who?" I didn't answer. She didn't need to know. Not yet. That night, Ethan called. His voice was half pleading, half confused. "Allison," he began, "I'm sorry if things got out of control. But no matter whose embryos they are, I'll still be a good father." "A father to whom?" I asked plainly. "To my children? Or to the image you've been protecting online?" Ethan sighed, voice dropping. "What's done is done. I don't want anyone to be hurt. We can't turn back. But if you agree, I'd like to co-parent with you, share the responsibility, for the kids." I gave a small laugh, untouched. "You don't need to father with me. I don't need a man ready to sign a birth certificate for children he doesn't even know belong to him. What Brianna needs is something else. She needs the truth, not someone playing another role convincingly." I hung up without waiting for his reply. This story didn't need half-written parts. The next morning, Graham called from his law office. "The court has received the petition to confirm biological ownership. We have a preliminary hearing in 3 weeks." "But Allison, there's something more important." "I'm listening. We just uncovered an unpublished addendum in the cooperation agreement between Carter Transit and Lakeshore, signed by Valerie Carter. It states transfer of medical costs for an undisclosed designated individual with your file code attached." I was silent for a few seconds, then asked, "Is the original intact?" "Yes. And I've already requested the court hold it as evidence." I sat, motionless before my computer screen. Outside, light rain fell, but I knew the real storm was just beginning, and I wouldn't dodge it. Logan sent me a copy of the Carter family's internal will on a chilly morning. The PDF was barely over 10 pages, yet it carried the weight of a pre-written family verdict. The signature at the end belonged to my grandfather, Harold Carter, founder of the first generation of the transport company my father now ran. The last line on page 7 held me captive. "To ensure Carter Transit Solutions remains under the control of direct blood descendants, it is mandatory that at least one biological heir be born and legally established before Charles Carter's 70th birthday." I glanced at the calendar. 6 months. 6 months until my father turned 70. No one ever told me this. I called Logan, my voice steadying itself. "The family goes on about legacy, about the company's prestige, but no one said all control could vanish because of one sentence on paper." "Because they never intended for you to know," Logan replied. "And I'm certain Valerie kept this addendum as her ace. You should also look at the attachment I sent. Terms from Cole Davenport's consulting contract with Carter Transit." I opened the second file. Legal lines neat and precise. The contract granted Cole a 3% stock option if he completed the medical logistics restructuring program. But on the final page, a handwritten rider bore its own code. In the event a biological heir is legally established under current law during the contract's validity, the stock option shall transfer to the heir's legal guardian. I read it 3 times, the pieces locking together so tightly I could hardly breathe. Valerie had built a 3-tiered plan. First, secure a child with Carter blood. Second, ensure I would not be the guardian. Third, position Cole close enough to control the company once the will's condition was triggered. I called Graham. The lawyer has reviewed the will, he said. The condition is legal, though unusual. It works like a lock. The family only keeps control if there's an heir. Without one, most ownership shifts to pre-designated strategic partners. Does Cole know all this? I asked. I believe he does, Graham replied. At least the part about the stock transfer. He didn't sign that by accident. I hung up, my mind replaying Cole's look that night at dinner. Not entirely evasive, but not forthright either. He had always been cautious, deliberate, playing life like a chess game. Now I wasn't sure which side he was playing for. That afternoon, I returned to Serena's office. She had already printed a financial relationship map connecting all parties. A closed loop, she pointed. Charles funnels money to Lakeshore. Lakeshore funds ReproCare. ReproCare implants the embryo. Brianna delivers a baby in time to save the company. Cole takes over once the will's clause kicks in. Everyone benefits so long as you're removed from the board. I sat in silence. What filled me wasn't just anger anymore. It was the quiet bitterness of someone who'd lived in a house too long without ever belonging. My mother, I whispered, never intended for me to be at the center of this family. I could work harder, study longer, earn more, but I would never be the face. She chose Brianna for that. Chose her to carry the legacy, to keep control. I was never part of her plan. Serena said nothing. She only placed her hand lightly on the file, an unspoken sign of solidarity. That evening, I emailed Cole. We arranged to meet at a quiet bar in the North Shore, the same place we'd sat years ago when we still spoke of weddings and children as if they were simple things. He arrived on time, still in a buttoned shirt, his eyes careful. Thanks for coming, I said, without preamble. I need to ask straight. Did you know Valerie used my embryos? He looked at me, lips pressed, then nodded. I knew when I signed. And you still signed? She told me you had given up, that you no longer wanted children, that if I didn't agree, the family could lose the company. Allison, I thought you'd understand that I wasn't doing it to betray you. Not betrayal? I gave a dry laugh. You signed a clause giving you ownership if a child appeared at the right time. And my mother made sure that child wouldn't bear my name. You think that's not betrayal? He didn't answer. I stood, pulled a copy of the contract from my bag. Here's the rider. If I'm confirmed as the legal mother, all of that stock shifts to me. Not you. Cole lowered his eyes, reading slowly. This isn't about me and you anymore, Cole. It's about the truth. About who truly has the right to be a mother. And about how many people bet on the wrong person. I walked out, not waiting for his response. The night wind hit my face. I stopped in the street, tilting my head toward the dark sky. 6 months. That was all the time left before the will's trap snapped shut. But there was one thing Valerie hadn't counted on. The twins in Brianna's womb were mine. And that fact alone would collapse the careful structure she'd built, piece by piece. Graham filed the petition at Cook County Court on a gray Tuesday morning, rain still dripping from the night before, the city draped in damp. The petition requested pre-birth parentage rights for me, a legal procedure to recognize me as the lawful mother of the twins, based on biology and original embryo ownership. At the same time, Serena submitted a sworn statement, copies of records from Boston Fertility's lab, the chain of custody log for batch ACART22 from 2022, transport invoices to Midwest ReproCare, and photos of shipping containers with matching barcodes, a closed evidence trail, airtight. That afternoon, the court accepted the filing, scheduling a temporary hearing 3 weeks out. I had no intention of going to the press. I didn't want my name tied to headlines about sisters fighting over a pregnancy. But I underestimated Valerie. Only 2 days later, an unsigned article appeared in a tabloid, headline blaring, "Angry Sister Demands Motherhood Rights, Jealous of Sibling's Successful Pregnancy." The piece was full of insinuations, citing unnamed sources who claimed I had given up on motherhood, that the embryos had been donated under unclear circumstances, And worst of all, that I showed signs of emotional instability after a broken engagement. It needed no byline. I knew exactly whose hand was behind it. Valerie had once been a teacher. She knew how to write an essay that stayed within the rules yet dripped with implication. And she held the strings of the media network Brianna had built from the very start. That night, I turned on my phone. Dozens of messages poured in from old acquaintances, former colleagues, a few college friends, some heartfelt, others just thinly disguised curiosity wrapped in sympathy. I didn't answer anyone. I opened my laptop and wrote an open letter. Not long, not defensive, just the truth. My name is Allison Carter. I am not someone who enjoys being in the spotlight or being mentioned in the media. But when a personal story is turned into a tool to manipulate public opinion, I no longer have a choice. I don't ask anyone to pity me or take my side. I only want to make clear, I never gave up my right to be a mother. I am not asking anyone to end a pregnancy. I am not attacking my family. I am not trying to take anything that doesn't belong to me. I only want the truth to be recognized. And I believe that medical ethics as well as justice cannot be reshaped by personal feelings, social media spin, or family reputation. I sent the letter to Graham for him to file with the court and the relevant parties. I didn't post it online, but the people who needed to read it would. Meanwhile, Logan was working nonstop. He reconstructed the entire money trail between Carter Transit and the Lakeshore Charity Network. A maze of funds, hidden through 7 shell companies, scattered across multiple states. Part of the money was disguised as donations to support disadvantaged women with reproductive care. But the recipients were only a tiny group, Brianna among them. I haven't published the article yet, Logan told me in a late-night call. But I sent a summary to a few other investigative reporters. You should be ready. Once it comes out, every layer of polish will peel away, and people will see what's underneath. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. I was ready. Not to strike back, but to defend myself with the truth. In the days that followed, Valerie launched a media campaign exactly the way she used to orchestrate Brianna's exclusive interviews. Short clips about sisters misunderstood but still bonded. Videos of Brianna caressing her belly, crying as she said she never thought someone once so close could become so distant. Ethan appeared in a brief live stream saying he believed in connection that went beyond blood because fatherhood is a commitment, not just biology. I watched it all with a new kind of feeling. No longer pain, no longer fury, just emptiness, like standing before a beautiful building and realizing the foundation had rotted long ago. Graham called after the court agreed to expedite the hearing. We have the advantage, he said, on evidence, on the record. But they have something else, emotional support from the public, and sometimes that makes judges more cautious with their rulings. I understood. I too had once believed what I saw online, until I myself was dragged into a staged campaign where every word was cut in half and every action twisted for attention. That evening I sat alone in my apartment, the city lights stretching out beyond the window. There was one thing Valerie and her supporters didn't understand. They thought I'd lash out in anger, that I'd counter with tearful interviews, with viral videos. They didn't realize my calm wasn't weakness. It was strength. The strength of waiting for the right moment. The strength of fighting not with media but with evidence. And when the whole truth came to light, no campaign, no online reputation could cover it up anymore. The gender reveal party in suburban Chicago had been staged like a spectacle. A wide lawn with blue and pink powder cannons rigged to fire, rows of white-draped tables, live stream cameras set at every angle, hundreds of guests in pastel colors clinking glasses. Brianna was the star, her satin dress hugging her pregnant belly, her face meticulously made up, eyes shining for the cameras. Valerie stood beside her, orchestrating every detail as if it were a brand launch, not a private celebration. I appeared quietly at the edge of the garden. I knew what was coming, but not how fast it would fall. As the MC invited the family onto the small stage, 2 county officers and a court officer stepped into the crowd. The chatter died instantly. Phones lifted to live stream. We bear an order from Cook County Court, the officer announced clearly. Regarding the establishment of pre-birth parentage rights for 2 embryos coded, a CART22, currently developing in the womb of Brianna Carter. The space froze. Ethan went white, Brianna turned to our mother, mouth open without sound. Valerie rushed forward, trying to snatch the document, but the big screen behind them suddenly flicked on. The camera log appeared. Embryo storage at 2:37 a.m. Valerie in a dark coat beside Dr. Roy Kincaid. both signing off on the transfer, door number 4 wide open. The footage was sharp down to their faces. Whispers rippled through the guests. A few covered their mouths, others streamed. Live. Ethan stepped back, his image as a model man shattered in real time. Brianna collapsed into a chair, clutching her belly, mascara streaking down her cheeks. She looked at me, terrified, like someone who suddenly realized she wasn't the star of the party, but a pawn in someone else's plan. I stepped closer, heart heavy. My little sister, spoiled though she was being manipulated by our own mother's hand. Valerie still fought. "This is edited," she shouted, her voice sharp. "No one should believe what's on that screen. This family isn't a circus for private matters." But Charles, my father, finally stepped forward. He looked at the screen, then at the court order. His shoulders shook, his eyes aged decades in seconds. "Harold left a will to protect the company, to protect this family," he said, voice breaking. "And you turned it into a weapon to crush it." He walked out after that, never looking back. The crowd buzzed, some cameras still chasing him into the nightlit garden. I bent down, laid my hand over Brianna's trembling one. She looked at me, eyes blurred with tears, stripped of all pride. I squeezed gently, speaking slowly so all could hear. "I will protect the twins, but the truth has to be told. We cannot keep living inside a painted picture." Brianna cried, not the performative sobs of a live stream, but the broken sobs of someone finally seeing the cost of manipulation. Blue and pink powder cannons fired, the colors falling into the silence, turning a celebration into a stage exposing a family's collapse. After that chaotic night, the news spread faster than any media campaign Valerie had ever engineered. By morning, major papers and local channels all ran the headline: "Obstetrician suspended over suspected embryo swap." Roy Kincaid's name was everywhere. His photo captured from every angle as he shielded his face with files outside Midwest ReproCare. The state medical board announced an investigation. Within 48 hours, Kincaid's license was suspended. Midwest ReproCare shuttered temporarily. Former patients demanded their embryo records be checked. Suspicion spread, shaking the network Valerie had believed untouchable. At the same time, Logan released his full exposé. The shell company system behind Lakeshore LLC was revealed. The legal filer was Carter Transit's CFO. The money trail was clear. My father's company funneled millions into a fake charity, then routed it into Midwest ReproCare to finance selected reproductive cases. The ultimate goal: ensure a biological heir for the Carter family before the will's deadline. Valerie stayed silent for 2 days. She withdrew from the media, canceled Brianna's appearances, no longer at her side. But the silence fixed nothing. Investors bombarded Charles with calls about transparency. Some international transport contracts hung by a thread. On Tuesday evening, my father summoned me to his office. The old room still smelled of polished wood and tobacco, but his eyes were different. Gone was the sternness of a retired Navy man. What remained was the exhaustion of someone at the edge. "Daughter," he said, voice low and broken, "I made a mistake letting your mother drag the company into family schemes. I choose you. Not Valerie, not Brianna. I choose the law." He pulled a thick envelope from a drawer. Inside was a notarized special authorization, legal guardianship of the embryos and the children born from them granted to me. In the company's board, Valerie was stripped of all decision-making power. I sat silent for a few seconds. He set his hand on the envelope, meeting my eyes. "Use it. Don't let anyone turn the twins into pawns again." I took it, my heart heavy. It wasn't victory, just recognition, far too late. The next day, Cole came to see me. He brought his laptop, eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. We sat in a small conference room at Graham's office. Cole opened his inbox and showed me an email from Valerie, sent 8 months ago. It was blunt. If the heir plan succeeded, Cole would receive priority shares instead of the usual consulting fee. "I stayed quiet because I thought I was just an outsider," Cole said softly. "But when I saw she used your embryos, I couldn't pretend anymore. I'll testify. I've already sent a copy of this to Graham." I looked at him. To me, he wasn't the ex-fiancé who walked away, nor simply a betrayer. He sat there like a man dragging himself out of a swamp, still caked in mud but choosing the side of truth. I nodded without words. News of the authorization and leaked email reached Brianna quickly. She asked to meet at a counseling center Serena had suggested. When I walked in, she was there, hair loose over her shoulders, eyes sunken from sleepless nights. No makeup, no influencer gloss, just a young woman lost. "I want this to end," she said, voice rough. "I don't trust Mom anymore. I don't trust her plans. But I can't abandon the babies. I don't want to be treated like someone who just carried them and then disappears." I sat beside her. "I never saw you that way. You're a victim too. But the truth has to be admitted. And the law has to recognize me as their legal mother." Brianna wept, but it wasn't the performance she used to put on for the cameras. If later I'm still allowed to see them, with a specialist present, I'll agree. I need help. I'll go to therapy. I want the children to know I love them, even if I'm not their legal mother. I held her hand. "We can do that. But there have to be clear boundaries. I will protect them, and you'll need to learn how to stand apart, no longer letting Mom control you." The settlement was drafted. After the birth, I would be the legal mother and primary guardian. Brianna would have supervised visitation rights, under the guidance of a therapist. Both of us agreed to family therapy for at least 1 year to begin healing. When we signed the document, I saw Brianna's hand trembling, but her eyes looked brighter, as though part of her chains had fallen away. Serena sat across from us and nodded gently. Graham closed the file, his expression steady. Logan documented everything, preparing for his next article. In that moment, I didn't feel triumph, didn't feel vindication. Only relief that one door had closed, opening a chance for the children about to be born. This time, they would enter a world no longer hidden behind ambition but shielded by truth. On the day of the hearing, the atmosphere in Cook County Court was heavy, like the sky before a storm. I sat at the plaintiff's table with Graham, while Brianna sat a few rows behind, clutching a tissue. Charles appeared quietly, not beside Valerie but near my attorney. Valerie entered, still carrying her air of confidence, in an elegant wool coat, striding to the defense table with her high-profile Chicago lawyer at her side. The judge opened the session, listing the parties: myself, Brianna, legal representatives of Carter Transit, and Dr. Kincaid, summoned as a witness. The courtroom was silent except for the clerk's keys tapping. Graham spoke first. He presented the complete chain of evidence: IVF records from Boston Fertility, the ACART 22 shipping code, camera footage showing Valerie with Kincaid, and Charles's special authorization. His explanation was precise. The plaintiff is not demanding an abortion, nor seeking to exclude her sister. She is only asking the court to confirm legal parentage based on biological and legal grounds. The embryo transfer was conducted against her will, and the evidence proves this beyond dispute. The judge nodded and turned to the defense. Valerie's lawyer stood, voice firm, meant to sound decisive. "We have proof that Allison Carter isn't simply protecting her biological rights. She has repeatedly stated her intent to use this child as a ticket to seize control of Carter Transit," he signaled, and an audio clip played. My voice, cut short, sounded cold. "As soon as the child is born, the company will be mine." Gasps rose, eyes fixed on me. My heart pounded, fingers digging into the chair. Graham objected immediately, but Valerie smiled as though she had landed her final blow. Serena stood, asking to present. She connected her laptop to the screen. "Here is the original recording." 32 seconds were cut out. The audio played again, full this time. My voice was there, but before the clipped sentence I had said, "Valerie thinks as soon as the child is born, the company will be mine. But I don't want the company that way." In the original, my voice shook, threaded with anger and despair. Not a confession, but a rejection. Serena pointed to the metadata on screen. The file was edited with software on a personal computer registered to Valerie Carter. This is not speculation. This is direct proof she orchestrated it. The courtroom grew suffocatingly quiet. For the first time, Valerie faltered, clutching her purse straps, her eyes drifting. The judge noted, signaling to continue. Logan rose from the press bench, asking permission to submit additional evidence. He handed the clerk a sealed envelope. "During my investigation into Carter Transit's finances, I uncovered an unpublished addendum to Harold Carter's will. It was stored at his former attorney's office. This is the original, notarized with signature and date." The addendum was read aloud. Alongside the familiar condition of a biological heir before Charles's 70th birthday, there was a handwritten clause. "This condition is valid only if the child is born in honesty and respect. Any deceit, substitution, or coercion renders it void." The room held its breath. I turned to my father. He closed his eyes, trembling hand pressed to his forehead. The very will Valerie had used as her shield had become the sword that destroyed her case. The judge's gavel struck. His voice was decisive. The court recognizes Allison Carter as the legal mother of the twins upon birth. Brianna Carter, per the settlement, retains supervised visitation rights. Valerie Carter is barred from interference of any kind. This record will also be referred to the county prosecutor for criminal charges against Dr. Roy Kincaid for embryo tampering and falsification of records, and a civil investigation into Valerie Carter for fraud and financial manipulation. The gavel fell again, ending the hearing. No applause. Only the silence of a family stripped bare, and a truth that could never be twisted again. Brianna was admitted to the hospital on an early summer morning when sunlight finally broke through Chicago's long rain. I waited outside the delivery room with Graham and Serena, every footstep in the hall echoing like metal striking stone. After hours of labor, the twins were born, a boy and a girl, strong and crying loud. A nurse came out and handed me the pre-signed legal motherhood certificate. My hands shook as I wrote, Avery Carter and Nolan Carter. Brianna lay on the bed, hair damp with sweat, her eyes tired but no longer resisting. She looked at me holding Avery and whispered, take care of them, but don't erase me from their lives. I nodded. The settlement was in effect. I was their legal mother, and Brianna was recognized as Aunt Birth, a new term, but fitting. She would have scheduled visitation, always supervised and paired with therapy. Weeks later, Charles called a special shareholders meeting. He stood at the podium, not as a commanding officer, but as a father finally brave enough to admit mistakes. Carter Transit is no longer a personal inheritance. It belongs to the people who sweated through each shipment, each night shift. I am converting the company into an ESOP, an employee-owned business. No one in this family, not even me, will hold absolute control over the fate of thousands of workers. The room was still for a moment, then applause swelled. I sat in the back, overwhelmed. My father wasn't just fixing a mistake, he was ending the cycle of power that had crushed us for decades. Meanwhile, Valerie fell into decline. Prosecutors charged her with medical record tampering and financial abuse. Her social circles turned cold. Invitations to glittering parties disappeared. At last, she sat before a cheap camera in her living room, posting a video she called My Version of the Truth. She spoke of her fear of losing legacy, of motherhood misunderstood, of ungrateful children. But the public no longer believed her. The comments filled with fury and dismissal. She had made herself a shadow in the house once blazing with borrowed light. I chose another path. With Graham and Serena, I founded the Carter for Honest Birth Foundation to support victims of reproductive abuse, from embryo swaps to financial coercion. The foundation quickly gained support from medical groups and communities because we gave voice to what so many had endured in silence. Logan finished his extensive expose, published in a national investigative magazine. He traced the money, the schemes, and the people caught in between. The story won major awards, not just for its revelations, but for forcing the public to confront how fragile reproductive rights are in a society of power and money. Serena opened her own practice specializing in medical ethics investigations, becoming a trusted name for patients seeking justice. But all of that was the outer landscape. What mattered most to me were Avery and Nolan. I brought them home after their early weeks in the hospital, learning to hold them, soothe them, listen to their tiny breaths. I had never felt such peace as when I sat in the quiet living room, watching them sleep, sunlight spilling through the curtains. One autumn morning, I took them to Cape Cod, where the sea stretched wide and the air carried salt. I held Nolan in my arms while Avery rested against my chest in a sling, walking slowly on the damp sand. The sunrise painted the water pink, the waves lapping like a lullaby. For a moment, all the chaos behind me faded. It was just us, mother and children, beginning anew. At the far end of the beach, Brianna appeared. She had come after a family therapy session, small in her long coat, carrying a simple card. When I approached, she said nothing, only handed it to me before stepping back, her eyes uncertain. The card read, "Thank you for not making me the enemy." I stood still, reading it over and over. I didn't promise anything, didn't embrace her as if forgiveness was complete. But inside me, a door cracked open. A door to the possibility, however fragile, that we could learn to exist side by side, not in deception, but in truth. I looked out at the sea, The waves kept breaking, carrying away what was left unresolved. Avery stirred, Nolan gripped my finger. A family born from wreckage, not perfect, but real. And the sunrise ahead promised that from here our path would be different. What do you think of a family not born of blood but of truth, courage, and love chosen each day? I once thought being born under the same roof was enough to bind us. But what I lived through taught me this. A true family is not where someone is given the right to control others, but where we all learn to listen, forgive, and grow. If you've ever seen manipulation, if you've ever been pushed aside for not fitting someone's expectations, then maybe you know the feeling of standing at the shore, holding small lives in your arms, and wondering, am I enough to guide them? I don't have perfect answers, only one belief. When adults have the courage to step out of lies, children gain the chance to grow up in the light. Have you ever had to redefine what family means? Have you ever forgiven without fully agreeing? Opened your heart while still keeping boundaries? Share your thoughts below this video. I read every word because my story might be the voice someone else needs. If you want to keep following these deep stories about choices, family, and the true value of love, subscribe to this channel. There's more to come, and maybe in those stories you'll see a piece of your own heart. Thank you for listening to me until the very end. See you in the next story.